My mother told me to stay quiet and let the real lawyers handle it before we even made it through the courthouse doors. She didn't look at me when she said it. She was too busy scanning the lobby, studying everyone around us the way she always had, deciding who was important, who belonged there, and who didn't. I had spent most of my childhood in that second category. And somehow, after 12 years, she still hadn't realized who I was. That was about to change. My name is Anna Thompson. I'm 31 years old, a licensed attorney in Nebraska, and for the past several years, I've built my career representing tenants against landlords who thought money and reputation could protect them from consequences. That Tuesday morning, I walked into the Douglas County Courthouse wearing a charcoal blazer, my hair pinned back, and carrying a briefcase filled with everything I needed for trial. My mother was only a few feet away. My father walked beside her in an expensive navy suit. They looked exactly like the kind of people who expected to win. They had absolutely no idea that the attorney representing the woman they were trying to evict was the daughter they had thrown out of their house at 19. To understand how we ended up in that courtroom, I need to go back 12 years. I grew up in a comfortable 4-bedroom house in Omaha. My father, Richard, owned a residential property management company. He managed several buildings and dozens of rental units, and he was extremely proud of the life he had built. My mother, Diane, stayed home. She organized charity events, managed our social calendar, and cared deeply about appearances. Everything in our family had standards: how you dressed, how you spoke, what career you chose, what kind of person you were supposed to become. My younger brother, Derek, fit those standards perfectly. He was athletic, popular, easygoing, and according to my parents, full of potential. I was different. My parents called me difficult. I asked questions. I argued when something didn't make sense. I cared too much about things my parents considered unimportant. And most importantly, I had plans for my life that they didn't approve of. When I was 19, I was attending community college on a partial scholarship and working at a coffee shop. One Saturday, I told my parents that I wanted to transfer to a 4-year university. Then I told them I wanted to go to law school. My father laughed. Not because I had made a joke. He laughed because he genuinely thought the idea was ridiculous. Law school? Yes. He told me I was chasing fantasies that other people would eventually have to pay for. My mother said she had been dealing with my attitude since I was born and was tired of financing my self-importance. Derek sat at the end of the table eating cereal and staring at his phone. The argument continued. By Sunday evening, my clothes were packed into 2 black garbage bags and sitting on the front porch. My mother handed me $40. My father didn't even come outside. I remember standing there looking at those bags. I expected myself to cry. I didn't. Something inside me simply became very still. I picked up both bags and walked away. My friend Kelsey let me sleep on her couch for 6 weeks. We worked together at the coffee shop, and she shared groceries with me without ever making me feel like I owed her something for surviving. I increased my hours at work. I kept my scholarship. I figured out financial aid. Eventually, I transferred to the University of Nebraska, Omaha. For years, I worked while studying. At one point, I rented a tiny room above a laundromat. The dryers ran late into the night, so I studied with earplugs. I graduated with a degree in political science and a 3.81 GPA. Then I applied to law school. I remember sitting at an old desk in my apartment when I submitted the application. A few weeks later, I found out I had been accepted. Law school was brutal. During my first semester, I studied constantly and still felt like everyone else knew more than I did. Then one afternoon, my property law professor asked me to come to his office. I assumed I had done something wrong. Instead, he told me that a memo I had written was one of the clearest he had received from a first-year student in years. I barely reacted. He probably thought I was strange. What he didn't know was that I had spent most of my life hearing that I was difficult, unrealistic, arrogant, and destined to fail. Having someone who actually knew the law tell me I was good at it meant more than I could explain. I graduated. I passed the Nebraska bar on my first attempt. Then I joined a small civil rights and housing firm in Omaha called Everett and Cho. Patricia Cho became my supervising attorney. She had spent 15 years handling housing litigation and had absolutely no patience for sloppy work. I loved working for her. She taught me how to build a case properly, documents first, emotion second. Never assume the truth will speak for itself. Prove it. Most of my early cases involved tenants living in unsafe conditions while landlords ignored complaints. Broken heating systems, water damage, lead paint, mold, illegal retaliation, and I was good at those cases. Then, one Wednesday afternoon, a woman named Claire Oates walked into our office. She was 34 and had a young daughter named Maya. Claire sat across from my desk holding a thick folder. She told me she had been renting a 2-bedroom apartment for more than 2 years. 6 months earlier, she noticed black discoloration spreading along the baseboard in Maya's bedroom. She photographed it. Then she submitted a maintenance request. Nothing happened. 2 weeks later, she submitted another. Still nothing. Claire kept going. By the time she came to me, she had submitted 11 maintenance requests. She had dates, screenshots, request numbers, timestamps, photographs. Everything. Meanwhile, Maya had developed a persistent cough. Claire took her to a pediatric specialist. The doctor documented respiratory symptoms consistent with mold-related irritation and specifically noted that the home environment could be contributing to them. Eventually, Claire contacted the city. A housing inspector came to the apartment. His report documented multiple code violations, including extensive black mold in Maya's bedroom and an adjacent closet. There was also evidence of ongoing moisture intrusion that management had never repaired. The inspector recommended that the apartment be vacated until remediation was completed. After receiving that report, Claire stopped paying rent. The property management company responded by filing for eviction. I looked through everything she had brought me: 11 maintenance requests, medical records, the inspector's report, dozens of photographs. It was an extremely strong case. Then I asked one final question. Who owns the building? Claire pulled out her lease. Richard and Diane Thompson. I stopped writing. The company is Thompson Property Management, she added. For a moment, I just stared at the name. Claire noticed. Is something wrong? No, I closed the folder. I'm taking your case. I didn't tell her they were my parents. She didn't need my family history. She needed an attorney. That night, after everyone else had gone home, I sat alone in my office. For a few minutes, I thought about that porch. 2 garbage bags, $40, 19 years old. Then I opened the court docket and started preparing. Patricia reviewed the case before trial. She went through every photograph and every page of the inspector's report. This is strong, she finally said. I agreed. The maintenance requests proved notice. The inspector proved the property was unsafe. The medical records showed what those conditions had done to a child. And the eviction had been filed immediately after Claire exercised her rights. The timeline was almost impossible to explain away. My parents had hired Gerald Marsh. He had represented landlords in Omaha for more than 20 years and had a reputation for being aggressive. Patricia asked if I was ready for him. I was. The morning of trial, I woke up at 5:30. I made coffee. I reviewed my opening statement. Then I checked my exhibits again. My hands were completely steady. Years ago, I learned that when things became frightening enough, there was a place inside me where everything went quiet. It was the same place I had found while walking away from my parents' house, carrying those garbage bags. I arrived at the courthouse shortly after 8, and that was when I saw them. My parents. My father had more gray hair, but otherwise he looked almost exactly the same. My mother was wearing pearl earrings and carrying herself with the same careful confidence I remembered. They were speaking with Gerald. Neither of them noticed me walking behind them. Claire was already inside the courtroom. She was sitting at the defendant's table with both hands flat against the surface. She looked terrified. I placed my briefcase beside her. I'm here. She looked up. You came. I told you I would. Then I heard my mother's voice behind me. You're not a lawyer. I turned around. She was staring directly at me. For the first time that morning, she actually saw me. My father stood beside her. His expression moved from confusion to recognition, then anger. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out my bar card. I graduated from UNO, then law school, passed the bar on my first attempt. I held the card where they could see it, and I did it without a single dollar from either of you. My father's face reddened. You were homeless when we threw you out because you were wasting your life. Gerald immediately put a hand on his arm. He knew better than my father did how badly this conversation could go. Yes, I said, I was homeless. I paused. You did that. Before my father could answer, the courtroom door opened. All rise. Everyone went silent. Judge Patricia Holbrook entered. She had been on the bench for more than a decade and had a reputation for reading everything before trial. After reviewing the docket, She looked toward counsel. Then her eyes stopped on me. Miss Thompson, yes, Your Honor. You argued Riverside last year. I did. Full judgment for the tenants? Yes, Your Honor. My mother looked at me again, this time differently. The trial began. Gerald went first. He described Claire as a difficult tenant who had stopped paying rent and then tried to manufacture a habitability complaint to avoid eviction. He showed photographs from when Claire originally moved into the apartment. Everything looked clean. Everything looked perfect. Then it was my turn. I admitted the maintenance records, 11 requests, all time-stamped, all unresolved. Then the city inspector's report, multiple code violations, extensive mold, a recommendation that the apartment be vacated until repairs were completed. Then the photographs. I placed them in chronological order. The first showed a small dark area near the baseboard. The next showed it spreading. Then more. By the final photographs, mold covered a significant portion of Maya's bedroom wall and ceiling. Then I introduced Maya's medical records. The courtroom became completely quiet. Your Honor, this isn't a case about a tenant who simply decided not to pay rent. I looked toward the judge. My client repeatedly notified management that there was a serious problem inside her daughter's bedroom. I lifted the maintenance log. They received 11 requests. Then the inspector's report. They knew the apartment had conditions requiring remediation. Then Maya's medical records. And while management did nothing, a child became sick. I turned slightly toward my parents. They didn't repair the problem. I looked back at the judge. They filed an eviction. Judge Holbrook turned toward Gerald. Did your clients know about the mold? Gerald looked down at his papers. They were aware of moisture concerns. That wasn't my question. Silence. Did they know about the mold? Gerald finally answered, Yes, Your Honor. The judge picked up the inspector's report. This report says the unit should have been vacated pending remediation. Yes, Your Honor. My mother shifted in her chair. My father reached toward her arm, but nothing they could say at that point mattered. The evidence was already there. Judge Holbrook dismissed the eviction. Then she ordered my parents to complete the required repairs and bring the unit into full code compliance. They were also ordered to reimburse Claire and cover documented medical expenses related to Maya's respiratory treatment. Finally, the judge warned them that failure to complete the repairs could result in additional penalties and review of their property management license. The gavel came down. Beside me, Claire made a small sound. Then she grabbed my hand. She was crying. My daughter is going to be okay. I squeezed her hand. Document everything during the repairs. If they delay anything, call me. She nodded. I packed my files and walked into the hallway. I had almost reached the exit when I heard my mother behind me. How dare you? I stopped. She and my father were standing several feet away. I did my job. You humiliated your own family. For 12 years, some part of me had imagined what I would say if I ever got the chance. But standing there, I didn't feel angry. I just felt finished. You stopped being my family the night you put my belongings into garbage bags and left me on the porch with $40. My father stepped forward. We raised you. We gave you everything. You gave me one important thing. He stared at me. You taught me that if I wanted a life, I would have to build it myself. I adjusted my briefcase. So I did. Gerald appeared behind them and immediately suggested they continue the conversation somewhere private. I didn't wait. I turned around and walked away. When I pushed through the courthouse doors, the cold air hit my face. I thought it was over. It wasn't. My phone rang before I reached the bottom of the courthouse steps. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Anna Thompson. An older man introduced himself as Henry Bradford. He was an attorney in Columbus, Ohio. Then he said something that stopped me completely. I represented your maternal grandfather for 31 years. My grandfather Robert had died when I was 16. He had been quiet and thoughtful, and unlike almost everyone else in my family, he actually listened when I spoke. I still remembered telling him as a teenager that I wanted to become a lawyer. He had looked at me and said, "Good. Do it right." Now, standing outside the courthouse, I listened as Henry told me there was something in my grandfather's estate that my parents didn't know about. A provision in his trust, he explained. It was designed to activate under very specific circumstances. What circumstances? One of them was your admission to the bar. I stopped walking. He knew? He hoped. Henry asked to meet me the following morning. He said he had documents I needed to see. Then he added something else. There is also a number attached to those documents. What kind of number? the kind you should hear in person. The next morning, I met him at a coffee shop. Henry was in his 70s, with reading glasses and the careful manner of someone who had spent his entire career dealing with things that mattered. He placed several documents in front of me. My grandfather had created a trust years before his death. Originally, my mother was the primary beneficiary. But there was a contingency clause. If my mother ever failed in her obligations toward one of her dependent children so severely that the child became homeless before turning 21, her interests could revert directly to that child. Then Henry showed me the amendment. My grandfather had added my name specifically. I stared at the page. He added me? Henry nodded. Then he told me what my grandfather had said when he signed it. Diane will do what Diane does, but Anna will find her way. Make sure it's waiting for her. I couldn't speak. My grandfather couldn't have known exactly what would happen. He couldn't have known about the garbage bags or the $40. But he knew his daughter. And apparently, he knew me too. Henry slid one final envelope across the table. Inside was a handwritten letter. I recognized my grandfather's handwriting immediately. Anna, if you're reading this, you did it without them. I always thought you would. There was never anything wrong with you. There was only ever something wrong with the room. Go build better rooms. Grandpa Robert. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it back inside the envelope. 4 days later, my mother called me. She still didn't know about the trust. She was calling because the repairs ordered by the court were going to cost far more than she expected. Her voice was warmer than it had been toward me in 12 years. She wanted me to help appeal the ruling. I let her finish. Then I said, I don't represent landlords, Mom. Silence. I represent tenants. We're your family. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, call Gerald. He already knows the case. Then I hung up. 3 weeks later, Henry formally notified my parents about the trust. My father called me less than 2 hours after the letter arrived. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. I waited almost a week before listening to it. There was something resembling an apology somewhere inside it. But most of the message was about how unfair the situation was, how the trust had supposedly been misunderstood, and how we needed to discuss everything as a family. I forwarded the voicemail to Henry. He called me back later. The documents aren't ambiguous, he said, and there is nothing to negotiate. Then he told me to enjoy my week. Claire's apartment was re-inspected near the end of the 30-day deadline. All the violations had been corrected. Several weeks after Claire and Maya returned, Maya had another appointment with her doctor. Her respiratory symptoms were improving. The environmental irritant was gone. No further treatment was necessary. When I received that report, I read it twice. That mattered to me more than beating my parents in court, because that was why Claire had walked into my office in the first place, not to become part of my family story, not to give me revenge. She wanted her daughter to be safe, and now she was. I still work at Everett and Cho. Patricia made me a junior partner earlier this year. I still represent tenants, I still prepare too much, and I still become strangely calm before trials. I haven't had dinner with my parents. My father and I have spoken once. My mother and I haven't repaired anything. Maybe someday we will. Maybe we won't. I no longer feel responsible for forcing an answer. Derek contacted me a few months ago. He apologized for staying silent when we were younger. We're slowly figuring out whether there is a relationship between us worth rebuilding. I'm willing to find out. My grandfather's letter is framed on the wall of my office. There was never anything wrong with you. There was only ever something wrong with the room. Sometimes, before a difficult case, I look at those words. Then I think about a 19-year-old girl standing on a porch with $40 and 2 garbage bags while the people who were supposed to believe in her closed the door. They thought they were throwing away the difficult daughter who would never become anything. 12 years later, they walked into a courtroom expecting another easy eviction. And the lawyer waiting on the other side was me.